Hello, my beautiful friends. My name is Kim, and I hope you're having a fabulous day today. If you are interested in true crime like I am, I hope that you would consider hitting that subscribe button. But either way, thanks for being here. Today, we're going to be talking about Riley Fox. Riley was 3 years old when she was brutally assaulted, and her very own father was being blamed for it. You will be shocked by the outcome of this one. It's not always as it seems. Let's talk about Riley. Riley Ann Fox was born on March 31st, 2001 in Wilmington, Illinois to her parents Melissa and Kevin Fox. Riley lived with her mom, dad, older brother Tyler. Kevin and Melissa had both grown up in Wilmington, and after meeting at a volleyball game, she had asked him out. They went to their homecoming together and fell in love. Kevin was 20 years old and going to Illinois State University when 18-year-old Melissa found out she was pregnant with Tyler. Kevin says he was very immature and didn't really handle her pregnancy or finding out she was pregnant very well at first. So much so that they actually did break up for a short time, but soon they would be back together. And 3 years later, in 2000, they were married. Kevin made a good living as a union painter, and Melissa worked as a waitress. Kevin had a rough start at parenting, but eventually he became an amazing dad, and everyone noticed. His family would joke that he changed more diapers, fed, and bathed the babies more than any other father they'd seen before. When Riley was born in 2001, Melissa and Kevin were over the moon excited. People who knew them said that they never saw Kevin without Riley. She was usually perched on his shoulders. Riley was described as beautiful, sweet, and cheerful. Her family would also say she loved singing, dancing, and catching butterflies. She was a little mini Melissa who had more energy than most kids. Her nickname was Riley Bug. So adorable. She was cherished by everyone who knew her, family, friends, and the community as a whole. Members of the family and community would later say that Kevin and Melissa were great parents. Kevin specifically doted on Riley. He even put a basket on the front of his bike so she could ride with him. The way that Kevin and Melissa doted on their kids made what came next so more painful. On June 5th, 2004, Melissa went with some of her friends to Chicago to participate in a walk for cancer. It was the first time she'd been away from Riley, but her father had died from cancer, so she wanted to contribute in whatever way she could. That night, Kevin and his brother-in-law were going to a music festival, so Melissa's mom was watching Riley and Tyler. After the music festival, Kevin went by Melissa's mom's house to pick up Riley. When they got home, he carried the kids in the house and Riley on the couch. He put them there because there was no clean sheets on the kids' beds, and it was really late and he was tired and he just didn't feel like making them up. So he just put them in the living room. He went outside and had a cigarette and noticed that the neighborhood was pretty quiet. At close to 2 a.m., he went to bed. The plan was for the next morning, Kevin, Tyler, and Riley were supposed to drive to Chicago and meet up with Melissa at the finish line. However, the next morning, Kevin was woken up around 8 a.m. by Tyler telling him Riley's gone. Kevin started looking through the house, the yard, but honestly, Riley was not the kind of kid to just disappear. And since she was only 3 years old, she couldn't really get far on her own. He said he noticed that the front door and the screen door were ajar. That did make him panic because he knew he closed and locked the doors the night before. The back door didn't lock properly, so anyone could have gotten in that way. So in his search, Kevin runs next door where little Riley's best friend lives, but they hadn't seen her either. He does call the Wilmington police, but because he was trying not to panic and because he was still in the midst of everything that's going on and wondering if his little girl is safe and that he just wanted her to be found, he called the non-emergency line.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could send an officer over here. My name's Kevin Flower. I woke up this morning and my daughter's nowhere to be found. How old is she? 3. You're kidding me? No. She cannot find your 3-year-old daughter.
So he didn't call 911. But as word spread and no one has seen Riley, a search party was formed. It seemed the whole town was helping out to look for little Riley. He said he was there searching too, but the police asked him to stay back and answer questions. I can't imagine how hard it would be to not search, to stay with the police and answer questions when all you want to do is be out there looking for your little girl. Kevin tells the police that Riley was wearing a white t-shirt with a pink flamingo on it and pink capri pants. As they get ready to start the race, Melissa calls Kevin to arrange where he and the kids can meet her. She says when he answered the phone, he was crying and he said, "I can't find Riley." She fell to her knees immediately. He really didn't need to say more. She could tell by the tone of his voice that this man that she had known for years, she felt his desperation. So Melissa and her friends turned around and drove back to Wilmington right away. She said the closer they got to the house, the worse she felt. She just had a feeling she would never see her daughter again. By the time Melissa arrived back to Wilmington, hundreds of people from the town were searching. They were digging through bush fields. Local businesses brought food and drinks and donated for the searches. Satellite trucks from television stations poured into town. Everyone was getting Riley's Amber Alert out on the air as well. By noon that day, over 500 people were searching for Riley. Some local people used horses, some used ATVs, some were on bikes. They were covering all the ground they could. A local woman, Kristen Lopez, and her daughter, Lisa Romano, had decided to search the nearby woods. The wooded area that they were searching is a huge forest preserve, and part of it is Forked Creek that flows into the Kankakee River. The woman and her daughter had just decided to check there where they were walking along the riverbank when the mom saw what she later described as what looked like a plastic bag floating near the bank. It was actually Riley. Melissa said she and Kevin remember the police jumping into their vehicles that same day around 3 p.m. and driving really fast out to that area. They were hoping that meant good news, but unfortunately the searchers were informed that Riley's body had been found. The Wilmington crime scene investigator arrived at the riverbank within minutes of receiving the call from Mrs. Lopez and her daughter. There's one thing I can say is that the investigation probably didn't go very well. The investigation was awful. The police decide very early on that Kevin is guilty and they weren't going to investigate anybody else. And I mean nothing. They did nothing. Such as the public restroom and the trash can located in the same park, it was never even searched. At no point did anyone from the Wilmington police even approach the building. And if they had, they would have found the crime scene. So Riley was found face down in the water wearing only her white shirt with the flamingo on it, no capri pants or underwear. She had duct tape around her mouth and residue from duct tape on her arms, as if she had been bound. The autopsy revealed that Riley had been assaulted, she had a bruise on her head, and then drowned in the river. They also find a pair of men's high-top tennis shoes floating nearby. The rape kits taken during her autopsy were sent to the FBI crime lab. The results came back with no foreign DNA, except a test for saliva in her vagina that came back as inconclusive. What does that mean? We'll put a pin in that one for now. So the police have Melissa, Kevin, and their family come down to the station. Melissa says they left her sitting alone in the room for 45 minutes. Kevin also. After this, the family is brought back together, and the police finally tell them that Riley's body had indeed been found. Melissa said after the fact she's not sure if they just didn't know how to handle a death like this, because Wilmington police doesn't have a lot of murder. Whatever the reason, it was pretty crappy way to inform the family and their beloved granddaughter was gone. At this point, the Wilmington police were not in charge anymore because Riley had been found on federal forest preserve, so Will County sheriffs took over the case. Starting as early as Riley's funeral, which was 5 days later, the Will County Sheriff's Department had already zoned in on Kevin. They had investigators attend the funeral with video cameras, which the family thought was normal, which it can be, but the family didn't know that the police were only filming Kevin all day. Only Kevin. Over 6,000 people attended Riley's funeral. That's 1,000 more than the entire population of Wilmington. You would think the police would want to record all of the people, but no. Also, the police started stopping by to play catch with Tyler, Riley's older brother. Now, at this point, Kevin's family and even Melissa's family said the couple should get a lawyer ASAP. They were encouraging them. Kevin and Melissa both knew that in a child case like theirs, the family is always looked at. So they took the stance that they were innocent, so they didn't need a lawyer. Please hire a lawyer. Just a couple of weeks later, they even allowed the police to have a forensic interview done with their son Tyler, with that exact same thought that they had nothing to hide and Tyler might know something. They really were hoping that they could find more out. The interview was videotaped, and let me tell you, it is absolutely heartbreaking. The forensic interviewer is Mary Jane Pluth, who works for Will County Children's Advocacy Center. On this tape, Tyler is asked normal questions at first, but no real rapport was built. And remember, Tyler is only 6 years old at this time. Then the interviewer starts asking questions about what Kevin did that night. Where did Daddy go? What did Daddy do? Where did Daddy take Riley? What did Daddy do to Riley? Over and over. Each time, Tyler answers no. Daddy didn't take Riley anywhere. No, he didn't see Daddy do anything. No, no, and no. She says it's okay if Daddy did something. It's okay if he saw Daddy do something. Over and over again. Tyler not only says no, but starts curling up in his seat. He pulls his hoodie over his face. He starts crying. She still doesn't stop. It is horrific to watch. She asked him 178 times. He answered no 178 times. The Foxes don't learn what happened in this interview until much later. But can you imagine? You lose one child and you have another one that's basically being tortured by a professional at the request of the investigator. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, Detective Edward Hayes, who was the lead investigator, was watching all of this behind a one-way glass mirror, instructing the investigator, Mrs. Pluth, what to say. Either one of them could have stopped this interview before they traumatized this young 6-year-old boy. Also, there was no child advocate in the room for Tyler. That afternoon, another detective took Tyler home. He questioned him again on the way home with no recording devices at the time. According to him, Tyler said he woke up and saw Kevin doing laundry in the middle of the night, although according to the water usage report from that night suggests that the washing machine did not run that night. So he wrote a report about what Tyler said. In his report, Tyler stated Riley was wearing different clothes than what she was found in. Even though this statement contradicted real actual evidence, they used it to pursue Kevin even more. The Foxes didn't even know, though. They wouldn't find out about that for months. They also wouldn't know that police were laser focused on a recording from a gas station down the street. It showed a red SUV going past the gas station about 4 in the morning, and they were trying to prove that that was Kevin's. They were only looking at that one vehicle to the exclusion of all the others, including the one that actually did take Riley. When Kevin is arrested, they tell him what Tyler allegedly said, and when Kevin's lawyer asked to see proof, oh, it's gone, it's missing. Of course it is. It never existed. On October 26th, Melissa and Kevin got a phone call while at home. It's around dinner time, and Kevin had been up since 4:30 a.m. and he had been working all day. He was exhausted and hadn't been able to eat much that day either. When detective called and asked them to come down to the police station, he said that they had news about the case. Kevin said it didn't matter how tired he was. They had been waiting for days, to find out what's going on. They let their families know they had been called, and immediately Kevin's brother, Chad Fox, who had been the one insisting that they get a lawyer, again told them to not answer any questions. He was afraid that the police had been targeting Melissa and Kevin. Kevin and Melissa have said that they were holding hands when they arrived at the police station at 7:30 that night. They just needed to find out what happened to their baby girl. They are met with the detective they had come to know so well and called him Scott. The couple said they trusted the police to solve their case completely. They had never thought the police would come for them. When they arrive that night, they once again separate them, but they tell each of them they have just a couple of questions. And because, they trust them, they agree. Melissa's taken into a conference room and left there. Kevin is taken into a tiny room that is maybe 8 by 8 with a small table and 3 chairs. The interrogation room can record sound and video, but for the next 14 hours, while several investigators very harshly interrogate Kevin, they recorded nothing. They start out being nice to Kevin, and then they ask him about his statement, the statement that Tyler made. Kevin has no idea what Tyler was talking about. Maybe he was just dreaming. Then they say that Kevin's car was seen by the gas station at 4 a.m. Now, this part is blatantly false, but Kevin doesn't know that the tape is low quality and you cannot see the license plate, so they have no way of proving that was Kevin. But he says maybe someone got his keys and stole his car. He's trying to rationalize it. He's half joking because he has no clue what they are talking about. During this interview, Kevin asks for a lawyer and to speak to his father. They tell him he is 27, he doesn't need his daddy. Then they drop all pretense and they tell him they know he killed his daughter. Of course, Kevin spends more hours telling them that that's just not true. After several hours, Melissa starts banging on the door. They've locked her in this conference room, probably so she couldn't interfere with Kevin's interrogation. They do come to talk to her and tell her the same things about the statement and the vehicle that they seen at 4 a.m. But she knows they are wrong. They tell Kevin if he takes a polygraph and passes, they will release him. If he fails, they are charging him and he is going to jail. Here's the problem with that. Besides the fact that a polygraph will not give you evidence to arrest somebody, they are also not supposed answers to be given in the middle of a tense interrogation. Actually, because of this, they have a hard time finding someone who would even perform it. So they used a regular police officer they had there who only performed maybe 90 polygraphs ever. It was done at after midnight, 12:20. When he failed it, they used that as proof. Now you imagine he's already been interrogated since 7 p.m. His heart rate, and they're accusing him. So his heart rate's already going crazy. So when he failed it, they used it as proof. They then brought Melissa in the room to show her he had failed. She said when she looked into his eyes, she knew what she had known all along, that they were wrong. And it didn't matter what the polygraph said. Kevin never hurt his baby. They had told Melissa that they thought it was an accident. They said maybe Riley was in the bathroom, Kevin came in and she got hit in the head and died accidentally. He panicked, took her to the river, made it look like she was sexually assaulted, and just left her there. Melissa said she knew if an accident had happened, Kevin would have performed CPR. He knew how, and he would call 911. When she said that she believes in Kevin, Detective Ed Hayes gets in her face and screams at her, "Your fucking husband killed your fucking daughter, and he doesn't love you." Melissa had never met this detective before, and she had never had anyone scream in her face like that before either. She was more than traumatized. They then remove her from the room. So back in the interrogation room, they start filling out papers to charge Kevin for Riley's death. They tell Kevin that they know people in jail and they will have him raped every day unless he confesses. Kevin absolutely believes them. The detective says, "If I finish writing up this paper, it's a done deal." Then they show him a picture of Riley's dead body. Then the detective bursts into the room, out of breath, and tells Kevin that he's just talked to the DA, and if Kevin confesses to any accident, they will make a deal. They will only charge him with involuntary manslaughter. He'll get a 3 to 5 year deal. He'll serve half and go home tonight on bond. This, my rock stars, is so incredibly illegal. Police officers categorically cannot offer deals. Only the district attorney can do that. These police officers are committing a crime, which is why they aren't recording any of it. And the way I know that is when Kevin sues them, he actually wins, but we'll get to that. So eventually, after 14 hours, Kevin confesses. Why did he not get a lawyer? Why did he confess? So I was talking to somebody about that, and they said it was like the room is on fire, and that's your only way out is to confess. And I would have to imagine that that's the only way that you would confess to something that you completely didn't do, that you could go to prison for a very long time.
They broke me down mentally, physically, emotionally. But I stayed strong. I knew I denied everything. Say you were trapped in a burning room, and there was only one door, and the fire was just flaming around you. It was my only way out.
So Kevin states that Riley was in the bathroom. He opened the door and the doorknob hit her on the head, killing her. Then he decided to make it look like an abduction, and that's when he took her to the park. He didn't really know the elements of the crime, but still he confessed. Then they, of course, book him.
Mr. Fox gave a statement that has led detectives to believe that he killed his daughter after placing her in a nearby creek.
These detectives, I want to say, and it's their instincts. Their instincts, their investigative instincts that led to this statement coming down.
I hear about these cases and these false confessions, but this one was like, why? Why did you I cannot imagine. Anyways, and of course, there are a bunch of reasons. The interrogation tape has never been released, but Kevin's lawyer says they fed him details. When Kevin is arraigned, his bond is set at $25 million. His brother Chad finally got him to accept help, and they hired an extremely good lawyer from the area. Her name was Kathleen Zellner. Kathleen is very good at getting criminals out of convictions based on DNA evidence. Chad said Zellner advised the family to leave Kevin in jail and instead put the money towards his defense. They hated leaving him there, but knew she was right. There's just not enough money to go around. This isn't a super rich, wealthy family. So the lawyer said when she met the families and then Kevin himself, she knew that she believed him. She did not see a guilty man. But what is your defense attorney gonna say? But anyways.
I decided to take a chance on him. Our position is that my client's innocent. I just felt like he was somebody that was really worth trying to save.
She could tell that he was a man who had been coerced into a confession that wasn't true. While Kevin is in jail, the townspeople are torn in two. There is one camp that believe in his innocence, and there is another one that basically had questions. Well, on top of that, the state's attorney had an election just a few days away. It is the current state's attorney, Jeffrey Tomschneck, versus his nemesis, James Glasgow. Jeff was quoted in the Chicago Tribune on October 29th as saying, "The evidence shows us that Riley was abused during her life." This claim triggered a DCFS investigation, because they have other kids. And it was just untrue. The pediatrician even stood up for him. There was no evidence of any abuse happening in this family. That just came straight out of his butt. The medical examiner, when later had testified in the lawsuit, said that this was also false, that there were no findings of abuse on Riley. So this guy just made things up to make Kevin look worse. Also, he was quoted as saying that Riley had fought for her life and that she was alive and struggling when he put her in the water. Again, the forensic pathologist, Scott Denton, testified that this was not his findings and that the autopsy did not support these false facts. I mean, this guy just won't stop. He was laser focused on Kevin. Luckily for Kevin, James Glasgow won that race and was voted into the state's attorney's office. This was right when Kevin's attorney, Kathleen, had started looking at the evidence. A big portion had been sent to the FBI, but there was an 8-month backlog. When the FBI lab is contacted by Kevin's lawyer, she is told that as soon as Kevin was arrested, a detective from Will County called and told them to stop all the testing. So they're saying don't test anything, but they're denying that they said not to test anything, because I think maybe at this point, allegedly, possibly, they are starting to have doubts, but they don't want to change it now because of the election and everything else that was happening. So anyways, the lawyer noticed that a portion of the DNA evidence was listed as inconclusive and finds out what that means. The current testing the FBI had isn't able to test the sample, but a cutting-edge private lab could do that. So she reaches out to the new state's attorney, and he agrees, because this James guy is not as laser focused as the other state's attorney. So he agrees. So the sample is sent to this lab. While waiting for the test results, Kathleen spends time disputing the rest of Kevin's confession, which was not hard to do because Kevin wasn't the killer. So he didn't know enough about the crime. He said he had parked on the bridge in these woods, took her body down to the embankment, and put her body in the water. Kathleen proved that a body placed in the water there would not have floated to where Riley was found. She also had tests done on the bathroom door and the doorknob. She proved that even being hit in the head with the doorknob, the door just wasn't strong enough to kill a child. Also, don't forget that Riley drowned. That was her cause of death. When the results came back on June 7th, it showed that the DNA did not match Kevin. When Glasgow learned this, when the state's attorney learned this, he immediately dropped the charges against Kevin and released him from custody.
At this point, it's clear that there's no evidence of any kind that will connect Kevin Fox to this murder of his 3-year-old daughter.
He sat in prison for 8 months. After 5 years had passed, the new state's attorney reached out to the FBI for assistance. The FBI sent 30 special agents to Wilmington. They interviewed pretty much the entire town. Around this time, the Fox's family offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of Riley's killer. The FBI joined in and offered an additional $10,000. A couple things that the FBI point out is what the night Riley was killed and the next day in Wilmington. So the house across the street from the Foxes was broken into that same night. The owner said her screen door had been cut, although she couldn't tell what was missing. A man a few houses down reported the same thing. Someone had broken in, but he couldn't tell what was taken. Several people on their street reported seeing a red Chevy Beretta the day before and the night of Riley's murder. The morning Riley was reported missing, the police called about a man wanting to take his own life that was less than a mile away from the Fox home. The man in the house was threatening to harm himself, and the first thing he said to them was, "Did you find that little girl yet?" The police at the time had dismissed all of this because they were so busy focusing on Kevin exclusively. As the FBI are conducting interviews, they speak to a woman named Trista Kiefer, and she tells them about a man she was dating just after Riley was murdered. In town, there was a memorial garden for Riley. Trista and her new boyfriend Scott are walking in town and they go by it. Trista says she was talking about how awful it was and how anyone could ever hurt a little girl and get away with it. She said Scott responded like he agreed, but there was a coldness in his voice, like he was faking it. She said it was just a feeling she had. Shortly after that, she and Scott broke up. Why she didn't come forward earlier, she doesn't have an answer for that. But remember, now there is a hefty reward which did not exist before. And before we get mad at her, when the FBI showed up in town, we learned she is struggling with end-stage breast cancer and she had a son to look out for. So, yeah. Kathleen believes that maybe prior that she was afraid of Scott. The FBI said they put Scott Eby on their list, but he wasn't at the top of the list. So who was Scott Wayne Eby? He was born on July 22nd, 1971. According to his own words, he had a normal childhood and was taught respect and courtesy. So he said, quote, "My parents didn't raise a monster. I became one over the years, and it's no one's fault but my own." He does have a lengthy criminal history. He was convicted in 1992 of forgery in Kane County. In 1993, he was convicted of a burglary charge in Cook County. Then in 2000, another burglary charge in DuPage County. Well, finally, the FBI go and speak to Scott Eby. It was easy to find him. Scott was incarcerated at Lawrenceville Correction Center in Illinois, and he was serving a 14-year sentence for a 2005 charge of S-ing a family member, his own sister. This was the man who had threatened to take his own life the day that Riley was taken and killed. And he said, "Have you found that little girl yet?" He also drove a Chevy Beretta, a red Chevy Beretta, and lived with his mother less than a mile away from Riley's house. When the FBI first showed up, it was unannounced. They said that they did this on purpose to see how he would respond. They said he seemed calm, and they asked nicely for a DNA sample. He did provide one and told them he wasn't involved in Riley's death. They left. Right after that, they had him on a recording calling his mom very frantic and begging her to come see him before he's sent away for life or even worse. His mom does go to see him, and he tells her what he had did to Riley. Then he writes out a 10-page confession and attempts to hang himself. This will be the third unsuccessful attempt since Riley's death. When it doesn't work, he agrees to speak openly to the FBI. He says he broke into several houses that night on June 6th, taking money out of wallets, watching people sleep, and then leaving. When he got to the Fox's family, he came in and thought that he had broken the back door, and when he couldn't find any money, he decided to take Riley instead. He went back outside, backed his car into their driveway, carried her out the front door with his hand over her mouth, and put her in the car trunk and drove off. Remember that unsearched bathroom and trash can? He says he essayed Riley in the bathroom at that park and threw her underwear and pants away in the trash can. Scott said that he was wearing a bandana, and after assaulting Riley, he realized his bandana had fallen off. Then he decided to kill her. Neither the trash can nor the bathroom were searched. And those tennis shoes they found, those were Scott's. He had gotten Riley's blood on them, so he pitched them in the river. And they even had Eby, his very last name, written on the inside. So he's thinking he's going to get caught pretty fast. Even he's like, oh my gosh, I'm going down. But they don't. These tennis shoes have his name. Anyways.
To tell you the truth, I expected somebody to be coming talking to me a long time ago because it had my last name printed on the tongue of the shoe.
But Will County had never done anything with those shoes. The FBI used the confession and the DNA, which did match to Scott, to charge him with first degree. On November 10, 2010, Scott Eby pled guilty to 5 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of predatory criminal assault of a child. The prosecutor approached Melissa and Kevin about their thoughts on the death penalty. They said they were not for or against it, the death penalty in general, but in this case, they wanted him to live a long and tortured existence in a bleak Illinois jail. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Because he pled guilty, he has no appeals and will never be free again. Melissa and Kevin, with the help of their lawyer, sued many officers and detectives of Will County and the forensic examiner, Pluth, the one that was interrogating the 6-year-old, the Tyler. The lawsuit claimed violation of due process, malicious prosecution, false imprisonment, and defamation. Kevin and Melissa were originally awarded $12.2 million, and at the appellate court upheld this judgment, but lowered the amount to $8 million. The civil judge and even the appellate judges said that Kevin had been falsely arrested, and when the detectives didn't have evidence to arrest him, they seemed to just kind of make it up. By the way, Kevin won the lawsuit long before they found the correct man, Scott Eby. So the justice system can be just sometimes. Kevin and Melissa have moved to a new town and started over. They have another baby, a little girl named Tegan. Kevin said he wishes Riley could be there. She would have been such a good big sister. Kevin and Melissa did divorce and have remarried other people, but they are still best friends and believe in each other 100%. They are also working on a passage of Riley's Law, a measure that would expedite DNA testing after child killings. It is making its way through the Illinois court system. Well, I'm glad that Kevin, eventually was let off and they did get the correct killer, Eby. I cannot wait to read your guys' thoughts down in the comments below. Thanks to all my channel members who continue to support me. Their names are on the screen. If you would like early access to new videos or decide the cases I cover next, you can do so by clicking the link in the description box. Well, if you guys have made it to the end, you guys are rock stars and I love you to death. There are more true crime videos in my Crimey Cases playlist if you would like to check them out. Either way, stay safe, my loves, and remember, if you see something, say something. Bye.